Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts.
Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you. Today is going to be a little bit of a different message for Christmas. You can see we have our Advent candles here, but we also have some other candles. For the last several years, we've been observing what we call a blue Christmas, acknowledging that sometimes the Christmas season can be difficult. And our community likes to take a moment to just wrap our arms around anyone who is struggling. But we're going to get to that. But first, a joke. It's very formulaic to begin a sermon with a joke, but it works, so hey. And you know, it was a little Christmas miracle. I was having lunch at Vietnam Coast, right over here on Hillcroft, with one of our community members, and we decided to open our fortune cookies, and this fell out of Claire's cookie. So I just thought it was great. Wasn't really a fortune, but made a great sermon joke, I thought. So live that you wouldn't be ashamed to sell the family parrot to the town gossip. That's good, right? How many of you grew up in a family where there was expected behavior, like in church or out in public, but then there was different behavior at home? Anybody else have that experience? Yeah. Particularly around spirituality. I grew up in a fundamentalist, very dualistic Christian religion, and so we were supposed to live at a different level. We had a witness that we had to be out in the world, my family was wonderfully human, and yet, because of that faith, there was a strong desire that we should really put a good message out there in the way we acted. It wasn't always that way at home, and I was thinking back to about, I guess it was 7 years ago? No, 8, in 2015. My dad was, I didn't know that was our last Christmas with him, but he was at the later stages of Alzheimer's. And I had come home to a little town near Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I had rented a car because I knew my mom was the caregiver. She had him at home, and it wasn't easy for her to come get me, and my brothers were with their families because it was Christmas morning, because I work on Christmas Eve. I have a gig. So I got the rental car and came home, and I got to the front door. It was about 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, and the swearing, the cussing that I was hearing pouring from the house was shocking to me. Both of them. My mom was getting him up and getting him settled for the day, and it was disturbing. But then, she let me in because she had the door locked, and I was like, "Are you okay?" She's like, "Oh, it's fine. We do this every day." And she had him settled in the living room, and he was so happy. He didn't know who I was, but he was so happy to see me. And I remember that day. Like I said, I didn't know it was my last Christmas with him. My dad, in the later stages of his illness, he really never lost the ability to have conversations. Now, they weren't always grounded in reality. They were never grounded in reality. But I remember we sat and he held my hand and just talked about how much he loved people and how much he loved his family and how good it was to have family around at Christmas. And it was a beautiful, beautiful memory. Later, I talked to my mom about it, because, we were never allowed to say bad words, ever, ever, ever. And I had heard her say words I didn't know she knew. And what I'm telling a little bit of a story out of school, but, she's also told this story pretty publicly, so I feel all right about it. She said, "Yeah, one thing about being a caregiver for your dad, I learned how to cuss again." We're a spiritual tradition that makes a lot of room for the human expression because we understand that our humanity is our divinity. Ernest Holmes said, "Humanity is divinity revealed." We believe that we're one with this infinite creative power, and it shows up as billions of human beings, each of us individual, each of us doing our own thing, and sometimes it's interesting the way people are expressing the divinity, isn't it? out in the world. Sometimes it's interesting how I'm expressing my divinity out in the world. But what I'm trying to get to is this idea that we don't have to hide our humanity. It's really okay to be human. It's really okay to struggle. It's really okay to cuss. Joanne and I know all the words that we need when we need them. Oh, sorry. I was talking about me. I know all the words, but we talked about it. Sorry, I called her out. I won't use them here, but I know all of them. Mark Twain once said that a carefully chosen swear word can sometimes avail more than a prayer. And I believe it. Did you know people that swear, they're smarter? Research has shown. This sermon is going in a direction I did not intend. I just want you to know that. But I'm going to rein it back in. But one more thing on cussing. If you slam your finger in a door, and I shared that story right before Thanksgiving, I did that. I promise there were some words said. It actually does help the pain. Research has shown. So do with it what you will. Some of our visitors may never come back to this church. That's what I know. But what we seek to understand is the nature of reality from a non-dual lens. And this is where we are different from traditional Christian churches who are dualistic, that there is a good reality, a spiritual reality, and there is a fallen earthly reality, a human reality. We have rejected that theology in unity. We're much more in alignment with Hinduism and Buddhism in that we understand that there is nothing but the one reality, which sometimes we call God. Some people don't like that language, and that's okay. It's nameless. It's beyond form, but it is one. And we seek to deepen our understanding, not of rejecting parts of the expressed world of God, but by understanding and seeing that God is in all. Alexander John Shaya is a contemporary Christian mystic, and he talks about to really be a Christian is to recognize the Christ in everyone and in everything. He says this about Christmas. Christmas falls at the darkest moment of the year, but it's also at the very moment when the light is once again made visible to the naked eye. The deepest dark is not the place where grace goes to die. The deepest dark is the place where grace goes to be reborn. I've seen it a lot. I've been around spiritual community for most of my life, really all my life, except for a few years in my 20s where I was in bars more than churches. But most of my life, I did both for a while too, just in case you're wondering. But I have seen this thing happen where people are afraid to share their darkness or that they're going through a dark and difficult time and particularly in Unity and other New Thought churches, because we have such an emphasis on the power of our positive thinking, that we really can create and shift reality with our thoughts. And so sometimes when people are struggling, they want to stay away. And so I don't know if any of you are watching at home today and it was just too painful to get in the car and drive here. I'm going to encourage you to do it. I've been teaching my little 12-year-old to do things scared. And I think it's important that when we're going through a difficult time that we still find a way to connect with people. And that's what we're inviting people into today and in this community. The dark times we go through are not fun. I won't say that. But they're useful and they're instructional and they're transformational. I wanted to read a little bit from the Christmas story from the first chapter of the Gospel of Luke. Starting with 26. In the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, God sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth, a town in Galilee, to a virgin pledged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of David. The virgin's name was Mary. That angel went to her and said, "Greetings, you who are highly favored, the Lord is with you." Mary was greatly troubled at his words and wondered what kind of a greeting this might be, but the angel said to her, "Do not be afraid. Mary, you have found favor with God. You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you are to call him Jesus. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over Jacob's descendants forever. His kingdom will never end." "How will this be?" Mary asked the angel, "since I am a virgin?" The angel answered, "The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. So the Holy One to be born will be called the Son of God. Even your relative Elizabeth, who is going to have a child in her old age, and who said that she was unable to conceive, is in her 6th month. For no word of God will ever fail." Mary answered, "I am the Lord's servant. May your word to me be fulfilled." And the angel left her. In the fundamentalist faith, you must literally believe in the virgin birth or you're not allowed in the club. I'm not going to talk at all about that. If you believe that Mary was a 14-year-old virgin who became pregnant by the Holy Spirit, that is yours to hold. That's not the point of this story, for me. In Unity, we seek to take the Bible stories metaphysically, metaphorically. And so the story of Mary is profound and full of insight for our own experience of our lives. And we see these images usually of a European young woman, although that would not have been the case. And she's usually depicted to be in her late teens, early 20s, but she would have been much younger. It says they typically would become betrothed at like 14. And she would have been dark of skin and hair and eyes. The story that we have created around the Virgin has become, and I just want to say this about fundamentalistic teaching of all faiths, but particularly the one I grew up in Christianity. It's actually, they're seeking to make a rational argument about this very small way of seeing the world. It's not about faith at all. And they're saying that you must have faith in these very certain facts that are recorded in this document or this collection of documents called the Bible in order to be in relationship with God. We don't approach it that way at all. The opposite of faith is not doubt. The opposite of faith is certainty. And how many of us grew up in a faith that was incredibly certain? And this is the way it is. You see, my experience of my faith has been that it is ever expanding and it's always meeting me wherever I am, no matter how good or unpleasant the circumstances I find myself in. And it is always calling me forward on a path of evolution. Of human evolution, of consciousness evolution, of my own healing and growth. Anybody else have some childhood wounds? Anyone? Everyone does. We all do. And our work in spirituality and our work in psychology, our work in recovery is always about to discover, uncover, and discard. To find where are the places that we are not operating fully as who we are created to be from spirit. And we all have lots of those ways. And the opportunities that we're given are to discover those patterns of false beliefs or wrong ideas or old ways of thinking or behaving and begin to examine them and release them so then we're free to be more of who we are. And so we're going to go back to Mary for a moment. You can call yourself Mary if you want. But we are all taking the central part in this story. Have you ever gotten news that you weren't expecting? Probably not from an angel, Gabriel. But have you ever had a moment in your life where something appears that was not anticipated and maybe not invited? A diagnosis, a divorce, an addiction, where your life is not meeting the plan that you had set out. That's what happened to Mary as a young woman in the story. And she was told it's okay. Because something that is happening here, which will be difficult, no doubt. And then as the story goes along, there's a lot of conversation about that. It was unusual for people to have the Holy Spirit overshadow them and impregnate them, although not unheard of. Particularly in the Middle East, there are several other cultures that have virgin birth stories. And in other ancient cultures. Ever heard of Athena, who burst full grown from Zeus's head? This is not meant to be a literal fact. This is meant to be an understanding that the divine is born in us. And it will come in a way that is not based on what's happening in the world. That some new way of understanding and relating to reality is being born in us. The Christ is in us. And it's not necessarily an easy path. And I think about Mary in the story as a young woman who's gotten this big news. Can you imagine what that conversation with her parents was like? Really, Mom, an angel told me. No, Joseph was nowhere around, I promise. It was just, yeah. We don't get that part of the story. That messy human part that's kept behind the doors. We just get this beautiful story of a young woman who is the mother of God. And for some reason, as I've been preparing this sermon, I keep flashing forward in the story. And I think of Michelangelo's Pietà, that beautiful sculpture of Mary holding her dead and crucified son. That's how that story ended. Did you know that? Well, there's another chapter too, but after that. But that's the same character. That this humble and willing person was given an assignment by life that she never asked for or looked for. And she said yes. And the way was filled with difficulties and wonders. She saw her kid make water into wine. That's a pretty good trick. They're saying there's a way that you can know that Jesus was Jewish because his mother thought he was God. I have several Jewish moms who are my friends, so I think they'll approve that joke. And by the way, happy Hanukkah to all of our community members who are Jewish and celebrating that beautiful celebration of light. And the story has heartbreak in it. That's my story. My story is that my life has not gone according to the plan that I had when I was young. It's just different things have occurred which have shaken me up, have taken me out of my plan and asked me to be different. The biggest part of my story, as you all know, is that I've talked about a lot, is my addiction and recovery. That I was going one way and then I was, just ran headlong into a concrete wall several times until I finally surrendered and began that work of changing my life on spiritual principles and practices. And then, when you start to change your life and build it upon spiritual principles and practices, you're going to be inviting more and more change. Here's the funny thing about this. I was a church musician, right? I was a music director at a New Thought church like this in Dallas, and then not interested in doing what I'm doing right now. As a matter of fact, when my minister mentor there asked me if I would be interested in starting ministerial school, I said a bad word to her, followed by you. I did. And she laughed. We're good friends to this day. So I think you should consider it. And then I began to feel that was the next indicated step. But I said, okay, I'll make a deal with the universe. I will complete this training, and I will be singing, songwriting, piano playing minister, but I'm not going to pastor a church. Yeah. Every step of the journey has been filled with unexpected opportunities and difficulties. We call this the Christ path. I'm focusing on Mary as the one. She too was on a Christ path. The Christ path is the path of discovering the divinity within us and delivering it into our lives and experience and expression through time in these human bodies and families and systems. And it's always filled with difficulty, with disappointments, with heartbreaks and setbacks, and wonder and delight and surprise and miraculous revelation of who you really are. All that. I was thinking about my own journey, because I do think about me sometimes, and how many times that what I thought was the end ended up being a beautiful beginning. And I've shared that when I was clear that I was going to do this work, when Reverend Howard has said that he would like me to be his successor here at Unity of Houston, I said yes. And I knew by this point it was yes, but I didn't really know what I was saying yes to. And the guy that said yes wasn't ready to do it. But guess what? The challenges that we've gone through as a community, going back to Hurricane Harvey and COVID and this huge cultural trend away from church and spiritual community attendance, all that, those have been the ways that I have been revealed. Wasn't looking the way I wanted it to look, but you know what? I was willing, like Mary, to go, okay, I'm in. Show me. Show me where I need to change and grow. Show me where I need to let go of my expectations. Show me how I need to change the plan so I can open up and be that conduit for divine creativity. Show me. And it's worked out. Still working out, but there's a saying that I was taught in seminary, but I think it's really true for all of us. God doesn't call the equipped. God equips the called. And your calling, and you do have one, is to be the best version of yourself possible. That is what you're called to, is to reveal the light of the divine within you in all areas of your life, and to be more and more of the wonderful presence and being that you are. That's what you're called to. And you're not ready to do all that yet, because you still got some things to work out. Well, guess what? You're going to get opportunities. Over and over again, you're going to get the opportunities to face the difficulties and find your strength, to face the roadblocks and find the doorways that they hid, and to face the darkness that is in your life and discover the light that was there all along. Father Richard Rohr is a wonderful Franciscan priest who wrote a wonderful book called The Universal Christ, and his understanding is our understanding. That he says this about that God is not separate from reality. He says God loves things by becoming them. Isn't that good? God loves things by becoming them. That all the things that we know and can see and point to and talk about are God in expression. It is God's givingness, God's love that is simply being, becoming, and we're a part of that. This is from his book, The Universal Christ. This is the great Christian leap of faith, which not everyone is willing to make. We daringly believe that God's presence was poured into a single human being so that humanity and divinity can be seen as operating as one in him, and therefore in us. But instead of saying that God came into the world through Jesus, maybe it would be better to say that Jesus came out of an already Christ-soaked world. The second incarnation flowed out of the first, out of God's loving union with physical creation. And if that still sounds strange to you, just trust me for a bit. I promise you it will only deepen and broaden both your faith in Jesus and in the Christ. And this is an important reframing of who God might be and what such a God might be doing, and of a God we might need if we want to find a better response to the questions we now face. I love that phrase, the Christ-soaked world. And again, we're not talking about Jesus as the Christ, although Jesus is the Christ. But that Christ connection and consciousness is in us too. And it's everywhere. And there is if we can open to this different way of seeing reality, of seeing ourselves, then what before looked like a dead end actually does become a starting line for something new. What before did look like a death actually is a resurrection, if we're willing to seek to live from this perspective. I mentioned I grew up in the fundamentalist Christian church, and growing up gay in a fundamentalist Christian church in the 1970s and 80s, I learned pretty quickly I needed to hide that. No one could know. So the lessons that I learned early in my life were there's something fundamentally wrong with me, and I need to hide and deflect and distract. So I became a performer because they liked that part of me, so I would just play into that all the time, growing up with this terrible secret. There was a man we lived next door to. One time at church, I heard him say about homosexuals, they should all be lined up and shot. And I heard that in my church, not in a service, but in the fellowship hall. I heard that, took that message in. There were also racist things said there. Politics was definitely aligned with their spiritual perspective. And yet that same man loved me. He did. And I loved him. It was complicated, complex. Still is, honestly. Still is. Been in quite a few therapy sessions and quite a few recovery meetings trying to work out all this stuff in my own life. And so what I've discovered on my path is that so much of being free and present and available to what's happening now is I have to go back and see where I got tied down in the first place. 3 weeks ago, I had a dream. I don't know that I was going to do this, but it was a Sunday morning. I was preaching at my old church in Dallas that morning. It was right before Thanksgiving. In the dream, I'm walking out of the little country Methodist church that I grew up in. I spent a lot of time there. I became their church piano player when I was terrible at 12 years old because I was free. Nobody else would do it. I didn't have a piano at home when I began to take piano lessons, so I got a key to the church, and that's where I practiced. I spent a lot of time over there, alone and in the community, tiny little community. But in this dream, I'm walking out of the front steps and down, and I see that water is everywhere in this little town. Everywhere. And I had experienced a big flood when I was a child, and that awful, muddy, murky water, it wasn't that. It was crystal clear and gleaming, but the water was everywhere. And I stepped out onto the grass, what I thought was grass, and it was a water lily garden. And I sunk to my knee, and I wasn't alarmed, but there were these beautiful water lilies everywhere. And I thought, what is this? But it felt fresh and alive and vital and clear and life-giving. There was this feeling of like beauty and safety and peace. And so I get on the street where I could still walk, and I'm walking around the block to the house I grew up in, and I see that everywhere that I can look is this beautiful, crystal clear water. When I get to the back gate of my house, there's a couple there who I actually know from much later in my life. And I'm walking up to them, and I cross my arms, and the wife says, "See, you're afraid. I told him you were afraid." And I looked around and I said, "I'm okay." Here's my interpretation of this dream, and it is still changing me. In that place where I experienced so much fear and hurt, where I experienced this need to hide and to not be who God had created me to be, all of the pains and the trauma of my early childhood, it was all filled with the Spirit. It was all surrounded by this life-giving energy of love and support. There was never a moment that I was alone. There was never a moment that God was absent. There was never a moment that it wasn't okay. I'm still working out what the color yellow means in the dream for those flowers. Maybe the third chakra of finding my power. Today we're going to do a ceremony in which all of us are invited to be witnessed by our community, to know that when we're walking through something difficult, that God is there. Hope is there, light is there in the darkness. And those of us who are not coming forward to be witnessed by the community, our job is to love and offer our compassion. So I'm going to invite the associate ministers to come and stand with me. This is called our Blue Christmas ceremony. We have 5 candles here and another Christ candle. If you're willing, as I call out these categories, to come forward and ask one person to simply take the taper and light one of the candles, what you're doing is you're acknowledging that, yes, I'm going through a hard time and I don't have to hide. And I know that the light is here in this darkness too. And if you don't come forward, your job is to witness the beauty of people, revealing where they are. If you're online, what I ask you to do is to not do any more comments during this ceremony except for these 2. If you are a part of this one category, just simply say, "This is me." And the only comment that I invite from those who are witnessing online is to simply say, "I see you." And so we'll begin by acknowledging those who are experiencing illness or caring for someone who is going through illness. And if that is on your heart this holiday season and you would like to come forward and be held in the love of your community, please do so. I'm particularly thinking of our caregivers. Thank you. So just one of you, if you would be willing, would you be willing to light the candle? Thank you. And just come down, if you don't mind coming forward and just letting the community see you. You can stand all around over here on the sides. Thank you. Just let us see you. And you can just put that back right in there. There you go. Thank you. Thank you. That's all we're going to do for right now, Cameron. Thank you. Thank you. Come forward. So, beloved community, I just invite you to witness these beautiful members who are walking through something right now, and to extend your love and your compassion. Open your heart. We've all been there. And in this moment, we know that in this difficult journey of walking through illness and caring for those who are ill, that the light of God is with you and within you. Thank you. You may be seated. Thank you so much. The holidays can be really difficult if you've experienced a loss, the death of someone deeply in your heart, and it may not have even been this year, but you might be feeling the grief this year in a particular way. And so if that is you, if you are experiencing grief from the loss of a loved one, I invite you to come forward and allow your community to love and support you now. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And if someone would be willing to light a candle from the Christ candle to another of these. Thank you, May. Grief has its own calendar. We're often surprised when the waves of grief come over us when we weren't expecting them. And some of us love this bright and cheerful time of the year, but it is painful. So right now, I just invite you to open your heart and feel the love of your community who are witnessing you, and remembering that that light of God's love is with you even in this time of grief. In your darkness, you are not alone. Thank you so much. Thank you. For some, it's the loss of a relationship that is the hardest piece that you're walking through right now. And if that's you, that could be a divorce, it could be whatever that is, but there's a pain in your heart about a relationship ending. And if you would like to come forward and be witnessed and held by your community in this pain, we love you and we are willing to stand with you. We're all good? Thank you, Charlie. Come on up. Oh, you going to come? Okay. Bobby, would you mind lighting the candle for us? There you go. Thank you. I was taught early in my journey that people come into our lives for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. It's a bit of cliche, but there is deep truth in it. So we honor those who have come to the end of these relationships. We give them our love, and we know that their love is pure and grows. Thank you. Thank you. The last few years, we've noticed a great rise in mental and emotional illness, mental health issues, the staggering rates of depression and anxiety that many of us are feeling, but also those who are experiencing family members who are going through mental health illness. And if that's you, if you would like to be witnessed and held by your community in this experience, you may come forward. Either for yourself or for someone you love. Would you like to light the candle? From the Christ candle over there. Thank you. There you go. Thank you, Sheila. We use candles so much in our ceremony just for this reason. We remember that in this darkness and in this struggle, there is light. There is light here. But we also acknowledge the heartbreak that this is for you. So we love you. We're holding a space for healing, that wholeness is revealed. And in this darkness, light is present. Thank you. As I was creating this ceremony today, I knew there was another category that I hadn't come to yet, and just aware of what people are sharing with me they're going through, and the word I got was overwhelm. There's just an overwhelming, there's just too much. And it may well show up as anxiety or depression for you, but you might just be having, it might be isolation or loneliness, but if you're just feeling overwhelmed in your life, by what's happening in the world or in your own life. And if you would like to be witnessed and held by your community, would you come forward now? Thank you. Thank you. Just take one of those, and the candle's over there. And so as Paula lights this candle, it's for all of us who are experiencing overwhelm to remember that the light brings clarity, the light brings peace, that we honor you right where you are, giving you love, giving you our compassion. And remember that you are enough to face whatever is coming at you. We love you. Thank you. So, whether you stood or not, we're all going through some version of this in some way. So I'd like to close this ceremony with a prayer for all of us. So invite you now into your hearts as we remember the truth that we are one power, one presence, one life, one love, moving in and through and as each one of us. So we speak a word of peace and a word of healing, a word of love, a word of clarity. And what I know is that we are never alone. And today we have been held by the love of this community, but we are forever, for all eternity, held in the love of God. And that no matter what we walk through it in the light, even in the midst of darkness. And we walk through it as the light, for that is who and what we are. And we give thanks. Amen.
Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.